Hey everyone, welcome to AccioJob's weekend event. Super excited to have everyone here. We'll just start in another 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for waiting. And once again, welcome to AccioJob's weekend event. Today, I am super excited to welcome a very special guest with us. Her name is Nipunika. She's in the final year of NSUT, majoring in computer science currently. She has interned in one of the best companies out there, which is most of our dream companies, to be very honest. Starting with she was interning with Google in the summer of 2021, and currently Nipunika is interning with Morgan Stanley as well. She will also be joining Google full time right after her college is over, which is great. And now let's hear Nipunika's story. And she will also be sharing some super insightful tips and tricks to ace your technical interviews and get that dream job you've always wanted. So let's add Nipunika on the screen here.
Hi everyone.
Hi Nipunika, how are you doing?
I am good, Hina. What's going on with you?
All good here as well. So first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today and taking out time for this session. Just to start with, it would be great if you could just introduce yourself to everyone here.
Okay, hi, I'm Nipunika. As Hina said, I am majoring in computer engineering, and I guess that's pretty much about it, like on the academic part. I'd say I'm a pretty big nerd, and I am really excited about, tech and just Web3, Web2, building stuff, all, all that nerdy jazz. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. Since it's Women's Month right now, it was Women's Day just last week, and you yourself are such a dynamic personality that I know of, and you have achieved such great success in your field till now. So I would really like to know your views about the status of girls or women in today's society, because it's Women's Month. This is something I really want to
Yeah.
know from you, especially.
So, I mean, see, my lived experiences wouldn't be all that different from your lived experiences or the lived experiences of women in this like life, like YouTube thing right now, even. So, what I can give you my expertise on something that would really be different is women in tech, because I have been able to see that, really close. Um, I'd give you three certain different incidences, and I'll let you judge for yourself. Um, just society in general, I guess we all know how we treat women around us and how generally things are, right? So, starting from the first incidents, right? I was in a coding society, right, in my college, and we had gone to a certain competition. It was an international competition, and I was in charge of a certain component of code. And this competition was super intense. It was rigorous. And in fact, we'd like stay up all night in the garage and we'd code stuff, ensuring everything is working fine, right? And at the end of the day, when we went to showcase our product, whatever you call it, uh, my component kind of sort of failed because it couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi wasn't working properly. Our component had its own different IP address, like
Right.
its own network. So when I came back, uh, there was this change in attitude. I could see this attitude throughout. So this is basically like a society where I and one of my colleagues is the only the only women in the software team, right? So we're just two women. Everyone who is senior to us is a guy. There's like I think we are the I'm the second woman in this, to enter the society. I think, right? And this is NSIT we're talking about. It's a tier 1 college. All of them are like really good engineers, no doubt about that, right? It just generally, this stigma on women being smart. So, anyways, I came back and suddenly I was answering to my peer, like the person who was in the same year as me. This is when I'm in second year. Like when they need to ask questions about my piece of code that I wrote, they will ask my male colleague who is in the same year as me and who's basically equal to me, right? And
Mhm.
when they would need to tell what to do next, it would come to me through my colleague. I wouldn't be invited to the meetings, even though I went to like a different city just to be in this competition, like on my own expense. And suddenly I'm now inferior to the person who was basically my peer up until 20 minutes ago. And it's not as if his component worked, his component also failed. Right. So yeah. And this is something that was ongoing. Even when I came back to college and they'd hold meets, they would be reluctant to give me and my colleague work, like my female colleague work. She's still a very good friend of mine. In fact, we ended up leaving the society for this very reason, because we felt like we weren't being valued as equal members, even though we were equal in every single regard, right? It's just that the people who in the society did not have the right experience to, or the right mindset to treat us equal, because they didn't have, like, I guess coding was a lot more important than creating the right kind of culture there. Anyways, the second instance would be when I got into, there is generally this misconception in almost all engineering colleges among all men, and I'd say it's some kind of salty comments, right? It's just that women get hired easily. This is something that a lot of people believe, that if a guy interviews for the same position, right, and girl interviews for the same position, and it's an entry level position, women will get hired easily because companies want to, maintain the sex ratio,
Right.
right? So yeah, and this is something we get to hear all year round, especially during placement season, from friends that we've been very close with, that like we'd get placed earlier. By we, I mean like women generally, we'd get placed earlier, and we'd get to witness this salty behavior that, hey, you got placed because you're a woman, right? You didn't have to do much. And it really stinks, because you know what? I pretty much, dude, I studied more than you. I know what you were doing because we're friends, and I studied more than you, honestly. It
Mhm.
really stinks when that happens, because then it's just like your friends were doing that. Um, in fact, when I got intern into Google, right? This was, I think, back in 2020. Uh, three other guys from my class also got in, like my very own section. So there's a WhatsApp group, and everyone was congratulating them and making it a point to leave me out because they didn't feel that I was worthy of that. And they're like small incidences over and over again. And this is something that I would not expect out of NSIT, because you know what? I come from a really small town of Muzaffargarh. It's on the periphery between Delhi and Haryana. And I've seen and expected that out of Muzaffargarh for a really, really long time. People don't study very hard in JEE. They don't, study their asses off to come and see this kind of behavior, like this
Right.
kind of obvious gap, right? So it
Yes.
really stings when that happens. There are like small incidences over and over again. So this one time I was the only person who got full marks in one subject, which is really not that big a deal. It's just like a college subject, right?
Yes.
And people would make comments like, this teacher only gives marks to girls because she likes girls, right? And it happens over and over again. And in fact, it's even gone to the point where people have had Instagram comments and fights about me, and just like came to my DMs and like challenged me to lead code contest, which is what, under fake names, and it's honestly been a lot. So, yup, being a woman in tech is kind of difficult when people around you who are like, I wouldn't say a lot of people are like this, right? Because I've had amazing friends who've pulled me up along with them, and if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here, right? Because I never learned from professors or anyone else. I've always learned from my peers. And college was a place where I did do that. I found amazing friends. They helped me, pulled me up with them. I found amazing girlfriends, right? Um, but on the same side, there are these people who would want to not see you succeed, because if you succeed, it means that they didn't work hard enough. And that really stings them. So,
Right,
yeah, it's
right. I
easy to.
completely, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there because being a woman, even if I'm from another background, I can actually relate to whatever you're saying because that's something we all face on a daily basis. And to be very honest, right now, because we're talking particularly about women in tech, I really feel in this particular field, because even I've done my research, even I've been working here since a while, there's this huge gap between male and female here. The number of girls will literally be one or two in say 50. That's
Well,
literally the kind of gap that we see in tech, which is way
yeah.
more than other fields. Why do you
There's this
think that is there?
There's this woman called Tracy Chow. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right, right? She's one of these like people that I look up to in the industry. She's worked with a lot of companies right from the founding stages, Pinterest, and I think she also worked with Facebook, right? So she's done amazing work. And she forces companies to basically be more transparent about their employee demographics, how many
Right.
women are you hiring and stuff like that. So when I see these, I sometimes read her blogs, and when I see these figures, it's kind of heartbreaking, because you know what, this is exactly what I was getting bullied for. I was getting bullied because there were way too many women in tech, and I thought, oh, it's going to be fun now when I join work and stuff. But no, it's not. There aren't enough women in tech. It's just a yeah. So I think that is generally because a lot of women are. So initially, I'd start with my coaching, right? In order to get into an engineering college, just talk about the specific path people take. In order to get into engineering college, people generally take PCM and go through the whole JE route. And I did that. I went to coaching for a year, and I saw there were around four women in my class of 50 girls, right? So this is right from the beginning, right from layer zero, that there aren't enough women who are being encouraged to take up mathematics, because there's been the stigma that women and maths don't go together, which is so not true because maths is not a gender thing, man. Right? So uh yeah, I'd say it's right from there, and after that, it's kind of sort of that women are not encouraged to be engineers, because this is not seen as
It's not your
uh
field.
yeah, it's not like it's not something that women do. Women are nurses, women are doctors, women are medical, but engineering is one place that is heavily male dominated, and we should honestly change that, because you know what, a lot of my friends are doctors. They aren't paid as much as engineers, and they work a lot harder. Honestly, I do one quarter of the work of them, and I get paid twice or thrice. So there is this, obvious gap. Because basic economics, I guess we have better margins with respect to product. But anyways, to all the women watching this right now, come on board. There are like way too many jobs and not enough talented engineers, and all of them are going to pay you so much for so little work. So just come over, right? And it's not that hard. You don't, you know what, nowadays you don't even need an engineering degree to do this. A lot more people are willing to hire you because the demand is just that much. So it's not something that you really need to specialize in. You don't need a degree like doctors do. You can just learn coding on your own or with the help of AccioJob, right? And get a job, because this is an amazing field to be in right now. And honestly, it's the future, the way the world is being shaped.
Right. Nipunika, you're actually motivating me right now, if I'll be very honest with you. I
Man, if that worked,
might
I'd
join
be
the
so
course
happy.
right now.
Yeah.
But no, this is actually true. I really feel in the future, I want to see this change where there are more women coming into tech, learning coding, programming. Because as you also said, there's no background. You should not be a engineer for it. Anyone and everyone who's interested in this field, who wants to excel in this field, considering this is one field which is going to excel in itself in the coming
Yeah.
years. And I really want to see more and more women like you joining this field, to be very honest.
I would love that because I think all the problems that I face right now as a woman in tech would vanish if there were just more women in tech. Because all of these problems are propagated by men who don't have our lived experiences. And you know what? We're awesome. So
Right.
screw that. Anyways, yeah, I
Yes.
think I got a little emotional there.
Hold on to that emotion. So, to be very honest, as I told you, I really want to see this change coming. So, that is why I want to just give like a gist of an initiative that AccioJob
Yeah.
themselves have started to bridge this gap, to get more and more women in tech, to teach them how to code, become software developers, get them good jobs that pay well, and skill them in a way that they are able to sustain themselves, excel in this field, etc. So I just for all the women or girls who are watching this who want to become software developers, Accujob has started a Pratigya initiative where they will be contributing 5 CR amount to train 2,000 girls in tech and get them placed in different companies. If you want more details about it, you can visit our website, acciojob.com, and there's a chat icon at the bottom right, and you can chat and get to know more about the Pratigya initiative and how you will be benefited through it. And I would really, really suggest all the women out there to actually consider this as a field. As Nipunika also said, there's a great success that you will achieve in this particular field. Um, yep. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Nipunika, for sharing your thoughts there.
Yeah, just
Now,
one point is, as someone who's already worked with Arcu, right? Because I've tried to teach there, I've mentored people there, I've interviewed people there. I honestly feel like you will get the right skills, right? And I hope when you do join, you focus on DSA the most because it will help you get placed. And it did help me. The DSA is the only thing that helped me get placed, right? And it is really amazing in the way that there are a lot of people that you'll find them and you'll find an amazing community. What I loved at Accio was that there were women in every class who were excelling. Like if you just see your portal, there's like a contest thing, right? With respect to how many questions you do. So whenever I taught substitute lectures in a lot of classes, and when I saw the scoreboard to solve those questions myself for the lectures, there were 2 or 3 women in every top 10 scoreboard, which is really encouraging because you know what, there needs to be that. If you are going to come here, you would need their support to, pull so that they pull you up. So it's going to be an amazing community if you join AccioJob.
thanks, Nipunika. I am pretty sure this will encourage women to get into this field. It really means a lot. Now, without further ado, I'm pretty sure a lot of people joined here are waiting for your knowledge, tips, and tricks that you have in store for us. How you cracked all these interviews for Google, Amazon, etc., and share your knowledge about structuring answers for tech interviews,
Yeah.
etc. So I'll just leave the screen, and you can take over from there.
Okay, I can do that. Give me a second. All right, I hope this screen is being shared. Hina, if you can tell me. Actually, I think it is being shared. So, anyways, so what I'll be talking about is basically just how to interview. So I am assuming that you've done your DSA practice and you've practiced coding, you know how to code, and moving from that point onward, that you're ready for your interviews. It's 2 weeks before your interview. Now you have to start going really into the specifics of how to structure your answers, how to answer questions well, right? So we'll just be talking about that. It's not as intuitive as it looks. On the surface of it, you may feel like, hey, I've already done all my practice. So what more there can be to interviewing that you need a different session on that. So, you know, it's not as intuitive as it looks. You can't just answer questions. You have to structure them in a way the interviewer wants you to structure them. So let's move on. This is just me. So I know a lot of people drop off. They don't stay for the whole thing. So if you're going to drop off now, I would just like to leave you with two things. First of all, don't think that you can prepare everything beforehand, right? You can prepare, you can practice every question there is, and then you will be on autopilot during the interview. You will need to be mentally present during the interview. It's incredibly important because you know what? Sometimes we turn our brains off and we just code them. But the interviewer does not want to know whether you can code this particular question or not. That is of no use to the interviewer. Because when you're at a job, you'll be thrown into these situations where you have to come up with the answer. You have to ask the right questions, uh, reduce your constraints, find redundant constraints, and then come up with the right strategy. And unless and until you do that, even if you solve the problem, the interviewer is not going to be interested in a solution. So the first and foremost thing is to be mentally present during the interview, and the second thing is to not be silent. If you think that, hey, I'll write amazing code and this person's brain will be blown because my code is so perfect, don't think that. Because as long you have to sell yourself in an interview, and until you do that, until you tell the person exactly what you're thinking, and you the person would not know your thought process. So it's incredibly important to communicate your thought process effectively and clearly. So if you want to drop off now, I think I've, you know, told you the most important thing. And if you could keep this with you, I'd be happy that you attended the session. The second one, so currently let's just see what is the objective of holding an interview, right? Why do these companies even hold interviews in the first place? They're not trying to see how smart you are. They're not trying to see if you can write a book. Their objective is simple. They need to get some tasks done, and they want to find people who do those tasks in the most effective manner possible. They don't want to spend crores and crores of rupees in just finding the right person for the job, and they don't want someone who's incredibly smart and well accomplished and has a Nobel Prize, right? They just want to know if you cross a certain threshold, and if you cross that threshold, it means that the money that they've spent in interviewing you, in like for giving you this time, is is well spent, because now you can get hired into the task for them, right? So they're just willing to see if you are a fit, if you are a fit with respect to how you solve the problems, if you're a fit with respect to the general attitude you have, and if you're a team player or not, right? So they just want to see if you're a fit, and if you're thrown in new waters where you don't know exactly how to solve a question, you can navigate that yourself. You can see, they want to see how you approach problems, if you ask the right questions, if you reduce your constraints, if you have the right approach. And even if you come up with the wrong answer, more often than not, they will be willing to hire you if you have showcased the skill that you are a good problem solver. They need you to be a good problem solver. That's effectively what engineering is. All right. So this, I know my segues aren't very proper. I'm a little rusty. So, anyways, um, this is the approach that I take to problem solving, right? And this approach is something that I've made through a lot of interviews that I've given, and it works for me when I have to write the code for a complicated DSA problem. It doesn't work if if the interviewer just wants to ask you a simple question like what are mutexes, what are linked lists. So it doesn't work on those questions. But if they ask you a reasoning problem like traveling salesman problem or a DP problem, it works very well. And this is exactly, I think, what Google requires. So this was made specifically for Google when I was preparing for their interviews. We'd come back to this. I want to cover something important before we come out. So, different type of companies hold different types of interviews. So, I've tried to arrange these in three different Buckets, I'd say the smallest bucket is the small startups, which are early stage startups, right? And hire for front end roles. So they would give you easy DSA. What do I mean by easy DSA? Like arrays, linked lists, linear data structures, popular questions, and they'll give you development assignments and ask you basic hoops and puzzles, right? For front end role, these development assignments kind of become important. And so, if you feel like DSA is not your strong suit, but you would love to work these front end roles, this type of bucket is probably for you. And it's really easy to prepare for because easy DSA, like linear popular DSA problems, take around 1.5 months to do if you are starting from absolute scratch. If you don't know anything about coding, and they still land you pretty amazing jobs that are between, that are definitely above 6 LPA. So this is definitely a win. Uh, this is one of those low investment, high return type of companies. Second comes up like mid-range startups, right? They generally hold 3 rounds. This is also true for big names. Like uh, big names में आते हैं Google, Morgan Stanley, Amazon, Intuit, Microsoft, all types of big names that you can think of. Like if it's a big MNC, it falls into the big bucket. So mid-range startups and big names have similar interview structure in which they'll have 3 to 4 rounds. Like Google has 5 technical rounds, I think, plus one screening round. The like with respect to companies, it's sometimes specific, but mostly it remains the same. Especially if the companies are coming on campus, it remains 3 rounds. The first round is generally a screening round, which means that they are trying to determine whether you're even worth spending more time on. Because you could have cheated on the online test and whatnot. So this round is generally easy round, right? They'll ask you conceptual questions a lot uh, with respect to what are linked lists, application of linked lists. So these are examples of some conceptual DSA questions. And if they're going into the course, they can ask you conceptual questions from OS, networking, DBMS. Apart from that, they will ask you, mostly they'll ask you easy DSA. Easy DSA is same as small startups. Linear DSA, popular problems like um, shuffling an array or finding the duplicate element in an array that has 0 to n minus 1 elements. So these are just some easy questions that I can think of on the spot. The second round is generally going to be an intermediate DSA round where they ask you like the complexity increases. They'll either increase the complexity of linear DSA, they'll ask complicated linear DSA problems, for example, how to reverse linked lists in groups of K. That is like fairly hard linked list questions, right? Linked list question. And this can also be like the second half of this interview can also be a design round. Well, they ask you something like if it's a design round and the position is a fresher position, the design round is going to be incredibly simple. It's going to be like easy problems. In fact, the first time that I interviewed at Morgan Stanley, the very first time, uh, there was a design round, and I wasn't aware that this round is going to be a design round, and I hadn't prepared for a design round ever in my life. But it was really easy because the interviewer was willing to help me. I told them that, hey, I've never done a design round before. So you'd have to help me out with respect to what are the expectations here. And I was able to make it, because the interview was really helpful. They told me what they expected out of me, and I coded that. It was pretty simple. The questions will be simple, like designing a parking lot or an elevator system. Just this design round, is going to be more about communication with the interview, understanding what exactly it is that they require, and coding that up in an oops oriented way. And third round is generally going to be taken by an engineering manager or like someone who has a tech and you know managerial background. So they'll ask you HR questions like what have been some areas in your life where you've shown leadership skills, what have you learned from that. If someone asks you for help during your own assignment and your team is really struggling, you have a deadline in 2 days, will you help them? Like general HR questions like that. And they may also move on to conceptual questions. These conceptual questions will generally be kind of difficult because they're taken by a manager level position, and they tend to be very application based. For example, if I have two quad core system and one eight core system, which one would you prefer? So conceptual question here will tend to make you scratch your brain a little, and they can also be just questions from graphs like how is a graph different than a tree. So there can be questions like that as well. Now, this structure is probably going to be the same with big names as well, except that there are, okay, we'll talk about that later on. There are two type of big name companies. Bucket one is DSA worshipping. They only ask DSA questions, and that is the only thing they're concerned with, because honestly, DSA is kind of sort of like the maths of coding. And if you know the maths, then you'll be good. So the first bucket is with respect to DSA worshipping companies such as Uber, Google, um, TRC. I think it's called. I don't remember the full form of TRC, but it's a really big company. TRC. So these are, they'll only ask you DSA questions, and even in fact, Google does 5 technical rounds of only DSA questions for entry level positions. I think for all positions, if I'm not wrong. I could be wrong. I'm not sure, but for SD2, they ask you only DSA level questions. The second bucket is with respect to jack of all trades. They want you to be intermediate at everything. So bucket one was Google, Uber, TRC. The second bucket is all the major banks that you can think of: Morgan Stanley, JPMC, Goldman Sachs, and like companies like Intuit, Walmart, Microsoft. They expect you to know a little bit of everything. These are especially the companies that would have a design round somewhere in between their interviews, right? And they would have uh, a round, like one interview where they will definitely ask you core concepts. What are these core subjects that you're supposed to prepare? You're supposed to prepare operating systems, compiler construction, operating like OOPS, networking, and DBMS. So they will ask you popular questions from these. For example, if I can just give you a quick example, operating systems where they could ask you what are mutexes, what are semaphores, can you give the algorithm for the dining philosopher problem? So these are just some quick examples. So I just giving you so currently I was just giving you a sort of intro to the kind of interviews that exist for different companies. So coming back to this ideal process of problem solving, this is generally for coding these intermediate and like DSA problems where you're supposed to show the code. And even if you're not supposed to show the code, the problem is difficult enough to be explained in depth. If the person asks you how will you implement merge sort, it's a simple problem. But if they give you a real life situation that involves graphs or trees or recursion or anything, uh, you should probably adopt this approach. There are 5 stages to this. As I said, the first and foremost uh, objective of an interview is to find out if you are a good problem solver. If you're not a good problem solver, the interviewer, like if you tell the interviewer that, hey, I've already solved this question before, or even if you don't tell them, just straight up code it, it's of no use to the interviewer, because they want to see how you think. So the first step is generally understanding the problem. Even if you've seen this problem before, ask questions such as what happens if there is an invalid input, what happens if there is a cycle in this input, right? Just ask as many questions as you can to understand what exactly is it that the interviewer wants. Because when you ask these questions, it gives that you already clear one of the biggest check boxes they have, which is, does this person jump in the problem straight away, or do they clarify the problem first? Because in order to be like a good software engineer, you don't need to spend uh, hours and hours doing the same work. We want you to spend as little as possible time uh, to do one particular task, because it saves money and time for everyone. So anyways, communication is super important. Ask as many questions as you can about the question itself. Try to understand what the interviewer wants of you, expects of you, right? uh, Once you've done that, you should try to think of the approach, and you should say it out loud. Always start from the worst case, always start from the worst case complexity. Always start with the most basic approach that you can think of. right? And start, even if you know the most optimal approach, start with the most basic approach and then build up to the optimal approach. um, Say that, hey, I can do this, but I can see that if I just sort this algorithm, so if I just sort the input, then the complexity goes down from on square to n log n, and that is obviously better. So start build up your answer to the most optimal uh, complexity, right? Be careful of the trade-offs. Just tell them that, hey, do you want me to optimize for space or optimize for time? In short, what, like, and once you arrive at the most optimal answer, ask the interviewer that, hey, is this all right? Is this what you're looking for? And if that indeed is what they're looking for, then you know start to code them. Now at this point, you may run into problems as in you wouldn't know what the answer is, what the correct approach is to the problem. In that case, feel free to ask for hints or see if you are going in the right direction. There are interviewers who may cut off marks for that. I am just warning you. But generally, they don't tend to be very good interviewers because, even in real life, you would need help with your problems. Like you wouldn't get to the answer all by yourself. Most interviewers do not take off marks for this. They are happy to provide you with hints and nudge you in the right direction. So even if you like, but if you're completely stuck, then asking for a hint at this point, at the approach point, is good. Because when you're writing code and you ask for hint, it comes off as uh, sloppy, honestly, because you didn't think this through first, and you started writing the code, and asking for hints then could probably change your entire code or make your code not pretty. And it's important to write pretty code because pretty code is really appreciated. Um, Coming to this third stage, once you have discussed the approach and the algorithm has been knocked down, and this is what the interview wants you to go ahead with, you start coding it. And while you code it, it's really important. Practice comes in super handy now, because if you haven't practiced enough, it will take you forever to code this problem, because there are just certain shortcuts and like muscle memory, I would say, that you build with respect to different data structures. When you're coding a graph, you implement it super quick if you've practiced it before. If you're implementing a linked list, and you kind of sort of have in your mind the map of a recursion of the recursion of reversing a linked list, it comes in super handy when you're writing this code now, because speed is an important aspect. The interview is going to be 45 minutes, no matter what. The interviewer does expect you to solve at least 2 to 3 problems in those 45 minutes. And if you're not able to do that, it reflects badly on you, and you are the one who gets marked down for that. So, speed is something the interviewer would never tell you that, hey, hurry up. I have to ask you another problem. They would never tell you that. But speed is generally of importance. You can't take 20 minutes, 30 minutes to code some problem in an interview. Anyways, moving on, the code has to look pretty, because this is also one of the major factors. Your code should be modular. If one code is spaghetti code and it's doing way too many things, you're writing everything in main, it's not a good practice. You should make different functions, and each function should do one specific thing. And the names of these functions should be very meaningful, like alphabetically sort the array. Something like that is a really long name, but you get the idea, right? Your uh, code should have meaningful names, and the code should be modular. And if you have the time and the time permits you, you need to explain the code. If the interviewer does not want you to explain the code, they would ask you to stop, right? But it's a good practice to start explaining the code, because it helps the interviewer see how what you were thinking while writing this, and it's generally good practice. So once you've explained the code, this step is kind of sort of like there are two. The next stage is testing. There are two aspects to testing. You can do two types of testing. The first one would be to take a common case and do a dry run on that. Uh, Now, this generally is not feasible when you're running out of time. Uh, so I would suggest that do a dry run with corner case in that case, because corner cases are super important. We need your code to work all the time, not some of the time. If your code works some of the times and it breaks at other times, it causes a lot of problems in production. So your code should work all the time, and you should take care of the corner case right from stage one, right from understanding the problem. You should write down what the corner case could be to this problem. For example, if the it's a really simple example. If the interviewer expects you to lexicographically sort a set of input, right? Then what happens if you're given numbers? So that is the kind of question you need to ask the interviewer right in stage one, right when you're understanding the problem. So, anyways, if time permits you, do a dry run. Some interviewers expect you to do a dry run. In that case, they will definitely tell you to do a dry run. And this is an important stage, especially in online interviews. You should probably have practice of doing a dry run. Like just when you're practicing problems on lead code, try to do a dry run and pretend that you're in an interview. So how would generally, like when you're doing it in your mind, you can see that, hey, if I make this tree, the left node goes here, the child node goes here, right? But when you're doing it in an interview, you kind of sort of need to explain your visual thinking to the interviewer. In that case, if there is a whiteboard available, like in the online interview, sometimes you can do whiteboard things, like there's a whiteboard in some platforms, so use the whiteboard. If not, just try to type it, right? So and ensure that you're understanding your visual thinking, because some the interviewers also have been taking interviews all day long and they're kind of tired. So it's easier to understand visual thinking rather than just say words, because then you have to spend a lot of mental energy in visualizing it. And the last part is Q&A. So when the interview ends, you have to be enthusiastic about the position. You should always ask the interviewer some type of questions about the company itself, which shows your enthusiasm, right? Ask them questions like, uh, how, like, what exactly is the career trajectory for a average software engineer here? What kind of projects do you work at? What is your tech stack, right? And if they are able to like if they can disclose that information, they'll be happy to tell you that, because everyone loves talking about the work. uh, Moving on, this is basically just the process that I followed for all the DSA worshipping big names, the ones here, because honestly this process is pretty much tweaked for those companies, especially Google and Amazon. And all these companies are basically ask you two to three DSA problems in a 45-minute interview. This process is pretty much perfect for them. Moving on, resumes are important because they help you get in your foot in the door, and if you don't have your foot in the door, you won't be able to interview with them, right? And it's important to create good resumes. Bad resumes are resumes that are not ATS friendly and have been built on Canva. Canva resumes are generally not ATS friendly, which ATS is basically a software that scores your resumes and it puts them in a stack. So the best resume is on the top of the stack, and whenever the recruiter needs to look at like resumes of people who apply to a position, they pick it up from the top. So it's important that the ATS software can read your resume. I prefer to make my resume on like in LaTeX language. It's basically a very incredibly simple language, and it's all online. So there is this. Um, I think Hina has this link for this document somewhere in the description box or the chat box. You can check that. It's a document that I wrote. Basically, I don't want to reiterate myself over and over again. So I was just written down some general practices, and there are a lot of sample resumes for different types of people, for people with no experience to people with some experience, right? And once you go through these templates, you'll get an idea of how you're expected to make a resume. And when you finally want to do that, I would expect that you either do it on Word or any type of software that lets your resume be read by ATS. My favorite platform is generally just Overleaf. It helps you write your resumes in LaTeX. It's super easy to understand, and I prefer this DDCV Wala template. All right, I've written how to do that as well here, and there is one particular case study on how I look at different resumes. So that is it about resumes. I don't want to reiterate myself over and over again. So maybe you could read that document. Behavioral round. I think we've already covered it here when I talked about HR round. Behavioral round is the HR round. You will be asked simple like questions which are situation based, and you should follow the star method in answering that. If you Google just the star method, STAR, you would find a lot of videos which will help you how to do that. And finally, these are just some misconceptions and bad practices because I've been doing this a lot, right? I have a community of juniors and my colleagues who come and rant to me about interviews. And then I was at Accu and I got to listen to a lot of rants basically on people who were not able to make it through some interviews. And the only thing that I can tell you, the most affecting thing that I can tell you is the placement process is definitely arbitrary. A lot of it is left up to humans, and when there are humans in the mix, there will be some type of judgment lapses, there will be luck involved. So, so if someone gets, suppose you're competing for the same position, right, and someone like your friend got a really friendly interviewer who is happy to rate people higher, right, and you got a really stingy interviewer who is not very loose with the marks. So the chances are honestly that even if you do better than your friend, the friend is probably going to get through because their interview will rate them better, and that process is arbitrary. You cannot control that. So all you can do at the end of the day is believe in yourself, believe that you are on the right path, and if you've done everything that you can to prepare for this interview, then if not this position, then you'll get the next position, because believe me, there are just way too many jobs in tech, just way too many jobs in tech, and everyone is willing to pay talented engineers. They're short on talented engineers, if anything. So if you can be not talented engineer, go ahead and be that, because you will be paid very handsomely and the work will be very little compared to other like jobs. Of course, that's subjective. Anyway, so these are just some common misconceptions and bad practices. Some people think that you need to be like a master at code forces, or you need to have an amazing code chef rating, and you need to be an excellent developer, like you need to have developed at least the entire NASA website on your own and have written 300 books. Nothing like that. You just need to pass the threshold, because honestly, as I said, they want to hire whoever, like a fit candidate, uh, in the least amount of time and money as possible. So if they're interviewing you, they've already spent a lot of time and money on you. So they want to hire you. If people come up to you, if you're approached by different recruiters, they have quotas to hire people. They want to hire you. Everyone is on your side. Nobody's trying to trick you. Nobody's trying to, nobody's rooting against you. Everyone wants you to succeed. So if you do the work, there is nothing that's stopping you from getting a job in tech. It's not very difficult. I've seen people do it with very little experience. I have seen people do it with, I've seen amazing people who are like incredibly smart do it. So there's all kinds of people in tech. So some other misconception, so some bad practice. I think these are just bad practices from now. Try to do mocks. Don't, not only like, if you keep solving problems and do zero mocks up until your interview, you will be in a bundle, I guess, because there is a sort, like, in order to go ahead and talk to the interviewer, structure your answers will adopt that strategy that I was talking about. It takes a little bit of time. So you should probably spend some energy on doing mocks, at least one mock before your real interview, right? And this is something that is so common. People give up in between the interview, in the middle of the interview. That is a cardinal sin. You cannot commit that sin. Even if you've never seen this problem before, even if you haven't practiced graphs, do not stop trying. Keep trying to solve the problem. Because as I said, the person wants to see how you think. They don't want to see if you can solve this one particular problem. Do not stop trying in the middle of the interview. Give it your full, and after that, you can cry yourself to sleep or do whatever you want. But when you're in the interview, you're 100% in the interview and you're giving your 100%. Um, yeah, I think there's something we've covered already. You will not know everything before the interview. You will need to be mentally present, and you should explain your code. Explaining your code is a must. These are just some common rants that I get to hear from a lot of people. They cannot solve a new question, which is basically, I see a new question, I've already done graphs, I've done 300 problems in graphs, and now this is my 301st problem, and I can't solve it. Why can't I solve this new problem? It's okay. You can't solve every problem. There are a lot of problems. Even right now, if I start again, I've been out of touch with DSA, but if I start again, there will be at least, like, if I do 50 problems, I would not be able to solve 10 of them. Because you know what? Sometimes your brain just doesn't work that way. Sometimes you're not able to think of the approach. Sometimes you're tired, and that's completely okay. Don't beat yourself up over it. And the second most common rant is that I've already solved this question before. I solved it 2 months ago, and now I can't solve it again. That is also a really common problem because honestly, think about it this way. When we learn maths, we take nursery KG first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth to build up our base, right? And then we get to ninth and 10th and we start doing real maths, and we get to 11th and 12th and we start doing calculus. So basically, the graph is exponential. It starts with incremental changes, and when you get to like higher classes, we're able to develop that kind of thinking that allows us to solve, like, think of approach problems in the manner that it's intended, right? Because you can't just solve, like, every problem is not the same. A calculus problem will be different and an algebra problem will be different, and you need to think in a certain way. I think my coaching teacher put it best when he said कि एक अलग तरीके से देखना होता है. So that is the same thing is here. DSA is a different type of problem solving arena, and in order to solve problems here, new problems, solve problems, you would need to develop a different type of thinking. And if a lot of people come here with zero experience of coding and zero experience of doing DSA. And you know what? It takes a little time to develop that kind of thinking. And in that process of learning, you forget some things, and that is completely okay. So when you forget an old question, just do it again. And the propensity that you will forget it a second time is exponentially less. The more you do, the more you learn here. It's You won't keep forgetting it over and over again. Honestly, um I think I've done prepared during my intern, then I prepared during my PPO interviews at Google, and then I prepared a last time when I was teaching at Accu. So I've prepared DSA 3 times in my life, and to this day I will forget it. But the propensity that the chances of me picking it up when I just see a question are all the more higher, because the more you do it, the more muscle memory you build. I'd say, right? So this is a graph which basically says, which is this is like the x-axis is the time that you have to put. Like, this is basically the more time you spend, essentially it will take you a lot of effort in a very little amount of time. This is x-axis is the time you spend doing this, and y-axis is the effort. So the effort basically becomes stagnant at a point. Once you would need to make very little effort to maintain whatever you know in DSA once you've done it enough time. So the more time you spend on DSA, the more you'll understand it. It's not something that you'll be able to prepare in one day or 1 week or 1 month. It takes time and it takes practice. So I think that is pretty much it. Can I take questions? I'm not sure. Actually, let me go to the live. I'm not on the live. I'll see if there are any questions.
Hi. Yeah, there are actually a few questions. You can see it on the stream
Let
here.
me get the. I can see it on StreamYard.
Yeah. Um, are you able to see it on stream?
Yeah, all right. I am able to see a lot of questions right now.
Awesome.
Damn, I did not see this while I was speaking. All right. I will just go through this. Mm, Right. I think most of these questions are with respect to like interview, like getting into AccioJob, and you would be able to answer them better.
Yes.
So
Also, I
want
saw
to take
one
them up.
question. Yes, I saw one question by Rocky. So, Rocky, you can join AccioJob course uh, for the pay after placement once as soon as you're in your final year of college. That was one question I could find about AccioJob. Manish, it's live, but it will be on our channel as well. Once we end the live session, it will be on the channel if you want to see it again. Okay, I think Satyaki has a question for you. Please share your DSA journey topic wise.
All right. So I think it starts with linear DSA. You understand how to do arrays. Arrays may you're supposed to do the really popular problems, like just the basic array problems first, because arrays can get really, really tricky. There's a vast number of problems which are available within arrays, and it's even to this day, if I start an array problem, I'm not sure if I'll be able to see it. Like complete it because there's just so much variety. So with arrays, it's important to ensure that you understand the popular problems well enough, right? And that you stick to your concepts. If you see a problem that does not have the concept you've already learned, then you skip it. After arrays, you start doing linked lists. Linked lists, may it's really important. Linked list is one of those low investment, high return topics because there's such less variety in linked list and they're asked in a lot of interviews. There's very little variety. So even if you spend like a week on linked list, you can do almost every question in linked list, and it's important to do different approaches in linked list. For example, if I ask you to reverse a linked list, you should know how to do it iteratively as well as recursively because sometimes people will ask you specifically for recursive code. After linked list, if I am sure, we move to stacks and queues. Those are also really important topics. There are some really popular problems like stacks are also low investment, high return topics because you know what, uh, low low variety, as I said, and they're pretty similar like to what you've done before. So they're not very difficult. It's important to do all the popular questions in stacks and queues yet again, because honestly, people just ask popular questions. They don't make specific questions for you because it's a very intensive process. You have to test the question, see if it's popular or not, right? So after stacks and queues, I think we've covered all the linear DSA, like linear DSA. We move to graphs. Graphs is the first topic that you will encounter in non-linear DSA, and here it's incredibly important that you wait. Oh, before that, we're supposed to do recursion and backtracking. Before graphs, we're supposed to do recursion and backtracking very well. It's incredibly important to understand the concepts here rather and do dry runs of problems. With recursion, you should be able to try run your problem on a few inputs once or twice, and then you'll understand how it's working exactly. And it's important to clear your concepts on how the call stack is being formed in the memory and stuff, right? So once you do recursion, trees should be a cakewalk. Trees are mostly based on recursion. Then with trees also low investment, high return topics, like very little variety in questions, and asked in almost every major interview. In fact, the left, top, right, bottom view of a tree is a very popular problem, right? And then we move to graphs, I think. Yeah, trees ke baad we get to graphs. And this is kind of sort of like a dreaded topic, but if you spend enough time here, I think you get it very easily. But only like really difficult companies ask graphs, I think. So even if you don't do it, I think you're good to go. So that was my journey, I think. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And there's another one by Mrinal. What are the top three hot IT jobs nowadays?
Why can't I see these? Is there something going on?
Mrinal, not sure. It came in at 8:56 p.m. Are you able to see it?
Uh, yeah. What are the top? the hot IT jobs nowadays? Well, I honestly don't understand the question, but in IT, there's always software developer, right? And then there are testers and stuff. Testers get paid a little worse, right, than software developers. I would say the most hot job is that of a software developer that is most accessible to you through AccioJob, right? Other than that, there are program managers, there are blockchain developers, there are UI UX people. There's all kinds of jobs. So, I mean, I don't know how to classify a hot job, honestly.
Right, right, right. I think that answers the question. The next one is by Narendra. Can we get hired with basic DSA knowledge, or acing DSA is a must?
Okay, so as I said, three types of companies. I think there was a slide where I said small startups, mid-range startups, and the big waves. So with mid-range small startups which are looking for a front-end role, you can very easily get hired with basic DSA. What do I mean basic DSA? Basic linear DSA. And that is does not take a lot of time. Like even if you're starting from scratch and you've never coded before, it takes you 1 month to get really good at basic DSA. So I think yes, but there are these other type of jobs that you would not be able to get without acing DSA. For example, like these DSA worshipping companies that I talked about, Uber, Google, TRC, Amazon, their DSA is pretty much a requirement.
Okay, I think that solves Ritesh's question also, who just asked what is the level of DSA questions asked at Amazon. So it's
Uh,
not basic.
yeah, it's not basic. They'll ask you non-linear DSA. They'll ask you DP. They'll ask, oh, I missed DP in the journey thing. There is dynamic programming. You will probably do it right after trees. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
There's something from that's interesting. Sometimes you're from other background asking you moving from what will be the smartest answer to it. Well, I like this is something that I haven't personally encountered because I am from IT background, but the answer that I can think of at this spot, like that I've seen other people give at Accio, is that this they're really bullish on this field, and this is where they think their skills are most aligned towards. Like you can say you are a problem solver and you think of answers really quickly, and you are a smart person who is able to navigate through a difficult situation, and you would like to be compensated equally for that. You were not happy in your previous job, which is why you can easily which is why you want to move to IT now, because that that is a job which will compensate you fairly for the skills that you want to improve in your life.
Okay, I think that makes sense. That was actually a good answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone has any other questions? Please feel free to ask on chat. Okay, awesome. I think we have got it all covered. Nipunika, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to have you on board here, and I'm very, very sure a lot of people, learned a lot of ways, tips, and your knowledge. You shared your knowledge about how to crack interviews, and considering placement time is coming close, it will be very useful for students who watch this particular video.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I genuinely had a really good time when I was working at Akio, and I think I really enjoyed the conversation that I had with people there. I mean, I still talk to her sometimes. He's a fun person to talk to. Yeah, it was good. Thanks for calling me.
Great. Thank you so much, Nipunika. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.